Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the 13th Asia Pacific Conference on Tobacco or Health, or the APACT 2021. Right now, we're starting the, for Thailand, we call it the afternoon session, but for you guys, it's a second session, the latter part of the youth program that we have today for the APACT 2021. And before I start, before I turn the microphone to Dr. Freeman and her team, there's some few questions that we have here. Question about the group discussion that's coming up last. The discussion on the declaration, if you can see in the agenda, the question is, will it be for the speakers or for the youth discussion? I would say it's open for everyone. We have a full panel of experts to talk about the draft of the declaration that we have, and we definitely need the input from you all. You know, if you have any idea or things to say about the draft of the declaration that we did, please go ahead, and we need your comments and feedback. Okay. And lastly, we have a satisfaction survey. You can see it in the chat box. It's in the PowerPoint file, the PPTX files. If you click on that, the QR code will pop up. You can scan the QR code, and you can start and go ahead with feedback or comments that you want to do. We definitely need to hear from you. Okay. All right. If you're ready, I believe that the speaker is ready as well. Let's move on to the afternoon session, or the next session, by Dr. Freeman, about how to use digital marketing tool for tobacco control on social media, how to create interesting. I believe that it will be interesting for sure. Are we ready? Dr. Freeman?
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi,
I can hear
how
you.
are you going? Excellent.
Good, good. All right. Whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Okay, so I should have some slides up here for you as well. Just give me a moment. They should be coming up any minute here. Oh, I've got a little spinning rainbow. Oh. There we go. Everything good? Can I get a thumbs up from Lillian or James if my screen is visible? Thank you. Okay, great. All right. I hope you all had a nice break. For those of you in Bangkok, I believe it was lunchtime. For us here in New Zealand, it's not quite dinner time yet, and probably scattered around the world, various sort of tea breaks and things like this. I'm going to be having two of my colleagues present with me today as well, Dr. James Kite, who is an expert in health communications in particular. He has special knowledge around using social media and how to evaluate social media for health communications. And also Lillian Chan, who is a current PhD student who I helped to supervise, who is really taking examples of health agencies who are using social media for public health messaging and helping them to evaluate them and see how effective they are, what kind of reach they have. So we've got two other experts joining me today. You'll see on this slide here that you can either go to this website or scan the QR code, and if you could sort of jump on there and tell us what social media you use and why you use it. Even if it's just to put up gorgeous selfies of myself or my food, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to be for professional reasons. We just want to sort of get a flavor of what you've got. And I think James has also popped the link right in the chat there for you as well, so that you can have a look at that. All right, so it should be accessible to you when I change slides here. All right. Social media. Now, we know it works really well in mass media campaigns for tobacco control. We have a long history of research on this. And Australia is one of the leading nations on developing materials for television campaigns. Thailand is also a leader in this space, has developed some incredible campaigns around educating the public about the harms of tobacco and convincing them that they should make a quit attempt. And so we know in those spaces that graphic warnings, so warnings that are a little bit scary, a little bit emotional, that sort of heighten your response, that make you think, oh, smoking is maybe something I should not be doing, or something that kind of maybe need to think about quitting, or it heightens family members to come and talk to you about smoking. We know those kind of high emotional responses work really well on television campaigns and radio campaigns. They also work really well on the cigarette pack itself. Again, I think there's now well over 150, 140 nations around the world that have picture warnings on the cigarette pack itself. Those images of, diseased lungs and eyeballs. And I have a friend in tobacco control who likes to collect these images everywhere she goes. So she has a very extensive library of really horrifying health images. So in the early days of social media, back when I was considered a youth and social media had just launched, we wanted to try out these same kind of heightened emotional messages. Can we just take what we know works in television and radio, on cigarette packs, and put it onto social media? And one of the campaign ideas that an NGO had, which was kind of fun, was on World No Tobacco Day, which happens every May 31st. Why don't we get social media users to change their profile image? So this is my profile image from Facebook at that time. This is many, many years ago now, 2007, 2008, I think. And you know how often you would change your profile image to put a frame around it to support that you're following COVID-safe rules, or that you support human rights, right? So why don't we do one for tobacco control? And on World No Tobacco Day, we'll get people to change their profile image so that they actually look like a cigarette pack warning. And you can either give yourself a diseased eyeball or a diseased lung, this kind of thing. And it's like, great, we'll get everyone to do this. It'll be really exciting. We'll pass it around, it'll go viral, make all this attention. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are shaking your head and thinking that was not a good idea. And in hindsight, yes, we can see it probably wasn't a good idea. And the reason it wasn't is, let's think about this. I made a bit of a joke about a selfie at the very beginning of this. And when you take a selfie and you post it online, you look on your phone and you adjust the lighting, and maybe you've got a ring light or something like this. You want to look good, right? You don't want to look bad or terrible. So that's number one. People put pictures where they look good on social media, not where they look bad. Number two, we don't want to frighten people with the way that we look. We want people to enjoy what they have on social media. Remember my messages from the first session? Why do we use social media? Because we enjoy it, it makes us feel good, or we feel we have to because we're missing out. We don't go on there to have, people be scared or disgusted. And the third reason is, a lot of us will have friends and family members who are smokers, and this seems incredibly judgmental and terrible to turn yourself into a pack warning. When people who are actual smokers, that's their reality. We shouldn't be glib about that. We shouldn't make it into some sort of funny, amusing thing. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and sometimes we just have to try things on social media and cross our fingers and hope that they work. That's why it's really important to evaluate what we're doing as well. But we can't assume that things we know have worked in other mediums are going to work on social media. It's a different type of environment, it's a different way of sharing messaging, and people have different expectations about that. I'm now going to hand over to James. He wants to start sharing his screen now, so he can sort of take you through why social media is different and some of the, not too much theory, don't worry, it's not going to be an academic session. And then Lillian will come after James to give you some specific examples of campaigns that have worked or haven't worked, or look like they might be working, and how you can evaluate what you're doing. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Becky. So on the screen now you can see just the results from the poll that we put up at the beginning. What social media are people using, and it's Facebook obviously standing out there in the middle as the most common social media, but there's other ones on there that we're all familiar with: Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, YouTube, all that sort of stuff. But really what we wanted to get at here is this second question, why do you do it? So Becky already talked about the key reasons why people get onto social media, and that's what's reflected back in the results here. So it's about connection, it's about seeing what's going on, it's about finding information, it's about watching funny videos, it's entertainment, it's all those sorts of things. So as I switch back to the slides, so as Becky was saying, social media, it's genuinely a different environment to what I'm going to call old media. So things like television, like radio, your billboards, all those sorts of things. Genuinely different environment. Those types of media, they're much more passive. There's kind of an expectation that if we put a message up there, a tobacco control message up there, people that will see it will kind of absorb it and then they'll act on it in some way. We had a lot more control over what people watched, what they hear, and when they hear and see it in those sorts of environments. But as we've seen with your responses to the question about why we use social media, that's quite different to social media. We use social media in very different ways. It's an interactive environment. It's a social environment. It's all about creating community, and it's a conversation between people. So the users of social media have a lot more control over what they see, who they engage with, when they connect, than what happened with old media. There's a lot of appeal to using social media for tobacco control, or for any sort of public health issue for that matter. For starters, billions of people around the world use it, and there's more and more people coming on every day and expanding the number of social media applications that they subscribe to. It's also relatively cheap to advertise on social media compared to old media. We get some new opportunities, like we can directly engage with our audience, with our target audiences. We can talk to them. We can hear what they think about our stuff in real time. It's readily available. It's always on. People can connect wherever they are, whenever they want, as many times as they like. So it's got that scale that I mentioned at the top. It's huge, but it's also got the ability for us to be able to tailor our content for specific audience or subgroups that when we were doing everything on TV and on radio, it was more of a, let's just blast it at this particular audience and hope that all the subgroups kind of work it out themselves. With social media, we've got a bit more flexibility. We've also got this potential to go viral. We can reach way more people than you might otherwise do with your television and that sort of thing, without perhaps even having to spend a cent. So you've got that massive potential there. And last one is a really key one. It's word of mouth marketing. So this is marketing between family members, between friends, between consumers. It's one of the most trusted forms of marketing. So it's a really powerful ally for us in tobacco control. But there's also these challenges that come along with it. For starters, there's risks that we didn't have to worry about so much before, like losing control of a message. So Becky talked about the example of having the Facebook profile image with the diseased eye on it. Not the nicest looking thing. There's been plenty of other social media campaigns that have thought they'd be really, really good, really dynamic, really interesting. And then when they put it up on social media, it just gets absolutely panned and criticized for totally missing the point or for being the wrong message. So we can lose control really quickly, and we can go viral for all the wrong reasons. It's also an environment that's constantly changing. It's really dynamic. We get new platforms coming online all the time. We get old ones that are sort of losing popularity. Some of them disappear entirely. We get format and algorithm changes happening, often without any sort of consultation or warning. And we then have to kind of work out again, what are we going to do? So that makes it a bit more resource intensive. We need to stay on top. What's going on? What works? What platform should we be on? Where's our target audience? Now, there's also plenty of competition and competing voices on social media. You heard earlier with Becky and Christina talking about tobacco control and the vaping industries being really prominent on social media. There's plenty of other voices there as well. So it can be quite hard for us to get our voice heard amongst all this talk. There's also new ethical concerns that we hadn't really had to think about before, particularly around privacy. So if someone's engaging with my campaign on social media, they can be revealing a lot of information about themselves often without necessarily realizing what they're doing, how much information they're giving to me. So we have to ask ourselves, in what circumstances is it okay for me as the campaigner to use that information? Is it even okay at all that I use that information? There's also a temptation really to treat, because of these risks of social media, to try and treat it like it's an old media. I'm just going to put a message out there and hope that people see it and they absorb it. But that really defeats the purpose of using social media. It's, like I said at the beginning, it's not the same. It's a very different environment. And the last one is that because social media has developed so rapidly, we're talking over the last decade really, we're really struggling to catch up with evidence in terms of what works, for whom, and in what context. So now I'm going to talk you through what we do actually know about principles of working on social media. This ties back into what Becky was saying around, why do people use it? You think back even to the Mentimeter results that I showed before from all of you. It's about community, it's about connection. And that means that negative or scare or fear tactics are probably not going to work. And this has been a big part of traditional tobacco control campaigning, has been around this graphic campaigns around emotional testimonials that have a really negative or sad aspect to them. These things maybe aren't going to work quite as well on social media. On the flip side, though, we can get advocacy and movement approaches on social media. We can take advantage of the community that people are trying to build, and we can do that much more effectively in a social media environment. So the second one is around connection to your audience. So as I said, advocacy and movement approaches are more effective on social media. You've got to take advantage of that. You've got to find out, what are my audience interested in? Why are they going to connect with me? Why do they want to stay in contact with me? And that means developing approaches that are appropriate to the target audience. Things like relatable stories, giving them personal, authentic stories that can be really powerful and engaging. They can make people want to keep coming back to your page, to your content, to find out what's new and how they can get involved. As well as being personal and relatable, there's these other characteristics that we know are essential. Things like credibility, like relevance, practicality, helpfulness. Making sure your content ticks all those boxes is going to go a long way to helping you effectively use social media. We do have an advantage here as health authorities. We tend to be trusted more than a lot of other brands or a lot of other industries or sectors. People are more willing to hear what we have to say and to give it the benefit of the doubt, if there is any. They're going to be more willing to have a look at it to see what we have to say. So that quote that you can see there, that's from an evaluation of a overweight and obesity campaign that I worked on a few years ago. And you can see that this person is saying, they know, just by the label itself, they know this is something they can trust. It's not something they're just going to quickly go past. So we can take advantage of this sort of inherent trust to make sure that our content is getting there, getting seen. And the last one, and really importantly, is you have to interact with your audience. So as I keep saying, social media, it's a two-way communication process. It's not enough to just stick content up there and hope that that's going to be enough. You've got to be engaging and responding to your audience. It's a challenge because it's resource intensive. It requires people who know what they're doing, and people who are going to be on there regularly to be able to engage. Because your target audience, they want to build a community. So when they see your brand, they might, or your campaign, they might connect with it the first time. But if they ask you a question, or if they try and respond in some way, and then you don't get back to them, they lose interest pretty quickly. They move on. So you've got to make sure that you're interacting, that you're communicating with your audience. But as I said before, practice has jumped ahead of evidence. So there's still quite a bit that we don't know. And the big one is, what's the value of engagement? It's what we're striving for on social media. We want to get more clicks. We want to get more likes. We want to get more comments, more shares, retweets, whatever it may be. We want to get these things. But what we actually don't know is, does that then lead to improvements in health outcomes? It's a really big and important question, because if the answer is no, then we're pretty much wasting our time on social media. Related to that as well is, are all engagements equal, or types of engagements, or are some better than others? So is a like the same as a share, or do we want to get more shares? And if we do want more shares, how do we go about getting that? What are the key aspects of content that we need to encourage so that we do get that? And the last one is, what platforms should we be using, or what social media platforms should we be using for particular issues? It looks like, something like mental health lends itself really well to a platform like Facebook. Tobacco control, maybe not so much a Facebook thing. That's kind of the evidence at the moment, but it's still very much developing. So maybe it's just we haven't tried the right things enough on Facebook. And that's kind of what Lillian's going to take you on to next. I'm going to hand over to Lillian now.
Hi everyone. As James mentioned, we're going to walk through a couple of examples of what's been done on social media in terms of tobacco control campaigns, and hopefully they illustrate a couple of the the ideas and the principles that James was talking about. So the first one I want to share with you all is the Truth Initiative. So this is a non-profit organisation in the USA that aims to reduce smoking among young people. It focuses on telling young people the truth about smoking and vaping through campaigns and community programs. And it also has an angle where its messages also focus on big tobacco's lies and manipulation, and shares that with young people. So I'm going to share one of their videos with you now, and here we go.
As if smokers need more reasons to quit, research shows smokers earn less.
Listen up, it's a revolution.
So that was one of the early campaign ads from the Truth campaign, and this one is a screenshot of the Truth campaign's Instagram page. So as you can see, it's kind of targeted young people. There's a few things going on here. This one in the bottom right, it's a post about a collaboration of the Truth Initiative with a street graffiti artist. This one just above it is a little breathing kind of GIF that helps people manage their cravings while they're trying to give up e-cigarettes. So they're really trying to speak to young people and target the things that young people are interested in. So as I mentioned, it targets young people, and the real strength of this campaign is that the message is to create a movement that inspires action amongst the people. So one of the early taglines was "Finish it, be the last generation that smokes." So it's kind of like an advocacy, it's a movement to try and inspire people to get on board with this campaign. The second thing is they tell the truth about smoking, and they have young people decide for themselves what to do, and they don't tell people what to do. So it's a very different style. And finally, one of the strengths is that they respond to the changing needs. So initially they were around being the last generation that smokes, but now that the e-cigarette situation has become so bad in the USA, they're focusing on trying to help young people quit vaping. So some of the digital marketing strategies that they use is they really focus on short videos and they share them on social platforms that young people use. But I think one of the key strengths of the campaign is that they engage young people throughout. So like I mentioned, they have creative collaborations with street artists, with musicians. They also get ambassadors on board who are all young people, and they also engage with influencers on social media. So one of their latest campaigns is asking a couple of influencers who are trying to quit vaping to share their vaping quitting journey on social media. So that's the type of strategies they use, and it's been an effective campaign. So in the early stages, there was quite a lot of evaluation done on it, and they found that the campaign helped, it increased young people's anger towards tobacco companies, and it also found that young people felt empowered to be able to quit smoking. So there's changes in attitudes that it was measuring in those evaluations. The next campaign I want to share with you all is the I Quit campaign, which is run by the Health Promotion Board in Singapore. It's aimed at people who are smoking, but they're considering to quit smoking and trying to motivate them into action. And it is tied in with one of the smoking cessation programs run by the Health Promotion Board. So I'll share that video now.
I'm here for I quit smoking for my son and my family.
I'm currently at the I Quit photo shoot, which is really quite exciting actually, to be able to quit smoking at such a flamboyant style and going through a program. They call it the 28 days program.
This 28 days is to achieve people to stop smoking, because what I understand is within 28 days it's possible that the likelihood of you quitting is much higher.
At first I thought I couldn't, because cigarette and me is like buddies, like can't separate, it's like glue. But right now I should and I must give it a try. I must.
I'm here to support my daughter. She came to me and said, I joined it and I want to quit smoking.
Yes, I will cry.
My boys have actually changed his life and to a better person. I hope he stays smoke-free forever.
So yeah, the I Quit campaign, as I mentioned, it targets people who smoke but are contemplating quitting. And as you can see from the campaign video, it takes a really positive, inspiring approach in its messaging. It builds this movement of people that are joining and quitting together, so that people don't feel alone when they're taking that step. And the style is honest and relatable. It uses real people to create emotional connections. So I think those are some of the characteristics that make it really resonate well. In terms of digital marketing strategies, so they used a mix of digital platforms, so social media, website ads, and an online app. And they also used other types of media, so like TV, billboards, and radio. And then they also integrated it all with in-person events like roadshows and community events. In terms of effectiveness, it increased the people's intention to quit it increased the proportion of people who wanted to quit from 56% to 66% over 2 years. And importantly, it increased the sign-ups to the I Quit program, which was the objective of the campaign. with calls to the quit line increasing from 190 a month to 700 a month on average. The next campaign video I want to share with you all is one that I think many of you will be familiar with. It's a few years old now and it was pretty popular, but I think it's an important one to share today. So I'll just bring that up right now.
พี่ขอไฟหน่อยขอไฟหน่อยพี่ขอไฟหน่อยหนูดูดเองจริงเหรอไม่ได้หรอกมั้งอายุยังน้อยอยู่เป็นมะเร็งเนี่ยต้องไปเจาะคอไม่กลัวหมอผ่าตัดแล้วน้องบุหรี่มันมียาพิษอยู่นะมันทำให้หน้าเหี่ยวด้วยนะสูบบุหรี่แล้วก็ตายเร็วไม่อยากอยู่เล่นนานๆอ่ะมันไม่ดีรู้เปล่าสูบแล้วเป็นทั้งมะเร็งปอดถุงลมโป่งพองไม่ดีแล้วพี่ดูดทำไมล่ะคะซึ่งโฆษณาชิ้นนี้นะคะต้องบอกว่าหลายคนดูบอกว่าโดนใจ
It became an instant hit, and some industry insiders are saying it's the best anti-smoking ad ever made.
Every time that we launch, particularly the media, the TV, the ads, the number of calls are highing up. Particularly the last one that everyone knows worldwide, it's increased 40% of number of calls.
So that was the smoking kit ad run by the Thai Health Promotion Foundation. As I said, many of you will probably have seen it because it was so famous. It had such great reach around the whole world. One of the key strengths of it is just that simple universal message that it has, and it in evoking that reflective response in the viewer. But the real reason I really wanted to share it today in today's conversation is that campaign used only online video, only that one online video. But because of the really strong storyline, it gained attention, leading to basically free media coverage nationally and worldwide. So it wasn't a big budget campaign at all, especially compared to the previous two that I've shared, but it was still probably the most effective out of all of them. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. You know, sometimes simple things can work really well if they're done well. So the last example I want to share with you is the Shisha No Thanks campaign, which is a project run in Sydney by a local health department and a community organisation. And it aims to raise awareness of the harms of shisha smoking. So that's also known as water pipe or argila or hookah, but yeah, a different type of tobacco smoking. So it's a co-design project, which means that all the material was created in collaboration with the community organisations involved. So I'll just share the video now.
Good to see you, Amu.
You too. It's been a while. How's work?
Yeah, no, not bad. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. What do you reckon, guys? Time for shisha?
Alex, there.
Get us nargile, mate.
Come on, Dad. I'm playing soccer. Get someone else to do it, Dad.
Iman.
Oh, Dad, I'm uploading something.
Ari, we need the shisha here.
You want a food or shisha now?
We need shisha.
Food time.
Oh, look at this. Shisha's coming. Shisha fire?
No, thanks.
So that campaign targets a very specific audience of young people from Arabic-speaking communities in Sydney. But one of the real strengths is that it worked with the community to develop that message and to ensure that the message was culturally sensitive, especially since some people view shisha smoking as having very strong cultural connection. So it was a delicate topic for some people to address. In terms of digital marketing strategies, I mean, the video you saw was the feature video for the campaign, and it was shared on social media through the project partners. So all the social media activity was organic. There was no paid posts or paid ads in it. And again, the whole project didn't have a big budget, but it managed to achieve over 350,000 video views and over 11,000 comments on the Facebook video. And importantly, it increased awareness of messages about the harms of shisha smoking. So I guess those were some examples that I wanted to share with you all, especially the latter two, to show that, you know, a lot of this kind of work on digital platforms, on social media, they don't have to be big budget, but, you know, if it's done well, if it uses those principles that James mentioned, like engaging with the audience and, you know, really testing what works with the people that you're trying to speak to, then it can be really effective. So just wanted to spend probably the last few minutes talking about that in terms of how to evaluate and how to monitor what you're doing on social media and on digital platforms. So digital marketing allows for a lot of different measurements. There are different types of digital marketing monitoring tools. So there are those that are part of social media platforms, such as Facebook and Instagram Insights. There's website analytics like Google Analytics, and there's also third-party tools like Hootsuite, Mention, Brand24. There's many, and they will often aggregate measurements from different platforms together. Secondly, there's lots of different types of digital marketing metrics. So the three broad categories would be those around reach, engagement, and conversion. So there are measurements that will measure how many people your campaigns reach, such as reach, impressions, video views, or exposures. There are numbers that will tell you how many people have engaged with your content, such as likes, comments, mentions, shares, retweets, or follows. And there's also measurements around conversion, so whether people have taken a specific action, like clicked on your ad, visited the website, or downloaded an app, or many others. Because there's so many, they can be a bit overwhelming. But the important thing that I do want to kind of highlight is that impressive social media metrics do not necessarily equal to campaign success. So as James was also alluding to earlier, just because people have engaged with the campaign, does that actually mean that the campaign has been successful in changing people's behaviors or reducing smoking? So this diagram here kind of illustrates that idea where, from the time when the campaign is delivered to people to the point where people actually make a behavior change in terms of smoking cessation, there's lots of steps in between. And often on social media or digital platforms, we can measure those early stages, so whether people saw the message, whether they engaged with it. But there's still more steps to actually reach the desired campaign outcome. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. In all the examples that I shared with you today, most of them got really impressive social media numbers, but they also then evaluated the effect that had on things like attitudes or quit attempts or calls to the quit line. So other measures of success as well, not just the social media and digital ones. So I guess the final thing I want to leave you all with is some advice on how to evaluate your digital marketing campaigns. So the first one is to use metrics or measurements that are aligned with your campaign objectives. So for example, if you have an awareness raising campaign, then things like reach or video views are good measurements to have because you want to spread the message to as many people as possible. But if you're hoping to create behavior change, then maybe things like clicks or web searches or downloads of apps are more appropriate. Secondly, social media metrics, they provide quick feedback. So on a day-to-day basis, they tell you what you're doing that's working and what's not, and then you can adjust your campaign activities straight away. You don't have to wait for that final evaluation. So they give you that kind of quick feedback. And then thirdly, which is what I was mentioning earlier, is in order to really know whether your campaign's been effective, you have to measure both digital marketing metrics, so such as reach and online engagement, and the actual health outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. So whether that's things like attitudes to smoking, intention to quit, or quit attempts. So I'm going to end there and pass it back to Becky.
All right, thanks so much, Lillian, and James as well. I'm just going to conclude with a few concluding remarks, and then we'll give a bit of time to open it up to questions from the audience or anything you want to share in the chat. I encourage you, if you've seen some really interesting campaigns or materials, pop the links up in the chat. People always are interested in sharing those things, and we would love to see your examples that you have as well. Okay, so a couple of things. I think one of the messages here is that you can use digital for really formal campaigns where, like Lillian's outlined, that you have, you're trying to affect behaviors, you're trying to achieve maybe legislative change. There's been some good work out of Vietnam, for example, where they use text messaging to get people to put pressure on the government to ban smoking in public places, so that you can have something quite specific that you're working on. You can have something really broad about, oh, we're raising awareness about this particular issue. The important thing is to know what you're doing and why. I think this random approach of just putting something up on Instagram or Twitter and seeing what happens is probably the worst way to manage social media. Having a real reason and saying, why are we putting this message out there? What are we hoping to do? Even if it's something really straightforward, or you're just taking pictures of an event and sharing them with people. Like maybe we're trying to recruit more people to our volunteer organization, whatever it is. If you are going to be trying something new and different, that's maybe a message you haven't seen in your country before or had before, I think it's really important to test those messages. And by test, I don't mean you have to hire an agency to do that. Show what you're planning to share or do or focus on with people who have nothing to do with your organization, who are completely outside it. So maybe people who you're at uni with or at school with, or members of your family maybe who are even smokers, and get their impressions, because sometimes we can completely miss, because we're so full of good intentions, that we're doing something really terrible and really awful that's just going to ruin the cause we had going for us. So that's my test before you put things out there that they'll live on the internet forever. That one thing that you think, only 4 people are going to look at this, maybe 400,000 people will look at it. Not that I'm trying to scare you, but just to be realistic here. And I encourage you all to use social media. You're all young people who are digital natives, who grew up with this stuff, who've been using it forever. You have a good sense of what it is that you need to do and why you need to do it already. Just need to formalize that and maybe put some resources into evaluating what it is that you're doing. One thing I'm just going to share with you now, just to conclude, is your application. Oh, I don't think I share the right one. Let me just try that again. Sorry about that. Share screen. That's the one I wanted to share and share. Okay. So this is what I wanted to give you sort of a concreteness of what I mean by a new way of thinking or a new angle on tobacco control. We hear a lot about the health effects, about how the industry is lying to us or taking money from us. Sometimes we hear about the environmental impacts, but I found in another group I was talking to of young people in the UK at a workshop, they weren't aware of the child labor involved in raising tobacco, and this to them seemed like a really new, interesting idea that would be really suitable for advocacy work by young people and online. So I'm just going to show you, this isn't done by young people, but just to give you a sort of a flavor of the kind of messages that could be used. And then you can liaise then with journalists in your country and say, look, this is a new angle you haven't covered before. This is something different, and you can make materials that go along with that. Because while, yes, digital media, social media, is really important, we've got to remember there's other kinds of media like news media that can work together, that we can harness and leverage off of each other. It's all content that you can feed into your various channels. So I'll just show you this quick video and then I'll wrap up.
Jinanga ndineriamige pili kuno ni makanaji mwini zaka kinoji cha 7 okuri kale naji mwenewa amai ababa ose kumata ndiye wadani nguri tingewo mwana mote ngari alindani ndiamige basi nuringa boyini basi nurani mumango kala
iwa siyantundu magira nchiro palibe tsiku limeri mabumulawo ukaja timanyamula makasubwera kuno kumunda zalima lima weluka ndilima dzulo ya mafilino bweraso zadaniso zalimaso tikatero basi nondoka pumulo kasamba ine ndilosangala kudazilira kusukulu koma ngachizimavula ni makope ndalama kuti nipeze makaba mavulo zetu nimalinde kaona apa kwene kuno kumunda kuno nimene kulire kutupite kuganya titeka umaganizia soza kuno
sukulu nyabwino umapuzila kowelenga basi ukapuzila owelenga umavira kuyani kumapuzile sokwina basi ukavira kupuzila okwina umakona sojani basi umakona basi nimavurani makujeni masanga mapuzilo kafuna shani ndiye umara umene kuti ndinofuna shakuri niye ndofuna kuti zikale mzarani zikale dokorala amene umathandiza anthu odwala ndokathandiza anthu odwala basi umakapita sokwina ndipitizaso virira kusukulu.
All right. Yeah, so I think that a lot of people, if they knew that the cigarettes they were smoking, that the tobacco was being farmed by young people, would be pretty horrified by that, and it might, engage greater conversation. I think I would also just like to point out in that video, the tobacco industry often talks about how farming is necessary because it gives people a source of income and raises them out of poverty, and that's clearly not the case here. Often tobacco farmers are trapped into long-term contracts that do not pay them adequately for their crops or offer any insurance if their crops aren't up to the standard that the tobacco industry expects. Anyway, that's obviously not what our session's about, but I just want to think, get creative about the different angles you can come up with here, and different ways you can find new voices, new things to talk about. Because social media is always very new, right? You gotta have something different, you gotta have something new, you always have to have new content. What was exciting and interesting yesterday is dead and buried the next, right? Okay. So now, sort of the final thing I wanted to say, share my screen again here. is that we know tobacco use among young people in the Asia-Pacific region is quite high, and alarmingly is increasing in countries like Indonesia. And while I know obviously COVID right now is a global pandemic, is something the whole globe is focused on, we can't forget about these other health issues that are incredibly important and in fact make COVID even worse. You know that people who smoke are much more likely to die of COVID or become severely ill with COVID as well. And we need more people to work in tobacco control. We need more people to be using media effectively to reach all kinds of people who maybe aren't reached by mainstream messages or news media, who are consuming things that we're not part of. I'm not part of TikTok, for example. I know that's a hugely important platform for people under the age of 18. So I just wanted to end on an encouraging note that we're so excited to see so many of you here and chiming in, even though you're having to do it from all corners of the world and different time zones. And just to thank you so much for your time and to open up the floor to questions as well. So thank you so much. Did anyone have anything? You can pop a question in the chat or share a link in the chat if you like.
Any questions?
Don't be shy. None of us bite. Lillian and James and I are all very friendly.
I believe so. Thank you so much for very interesting topics. If anyone has any question, you can turn on your camera if you prefer. If not, you can type in the chat box. We have 10 minutes, roughly 10 minutes for the question to be answered. Anyone?
All right. If not, I can show you a video, and then we can do a little poll. You'll have to promise me you'll post your answer in the chat, though, if I show you another video. It's only like 30 seconds. You will? All right. There we go. Okay, so this video, I want you to think about when you're watching this. Does humor work in tobacco control mass media? And does humor work for tobacco control social media campaigns? Have a watch.
Prevent Catmageddon. I get it. Now it works. I think it works, and we should have more campaigns like this, right?
All right, so I want participants in the chat. What do you think about the use of humor in tobacco control in a message like that? You'll have access to the chat, right? Type something.
I think they all do.
Yes or no? Even you just type yes or no. I'll be satisfied. Oh, here we go. Yes, it definitely will be helpful. It might be helpful. Oh, someone's sitting on the fence there. Yes. Okay. Yeah, okay, good, good. So what do you think it can? I don't know. Lily and James, let's have a little live debate here. I'm skeptical. I worry that a video like that, people will just laugh and think, oh, I love cats so much. I love a cat video. It's so great. And then move on with their lives and don't even connect that to the tobacco control message. I think swinging, I've told you at the very beginning, using those scared disease lung stuff, not great. But is it too far to swing the other way to make something that's so horrifying funny? Where's that sweet spot in the middle? Lillian, James?
I mean, I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit. I think it has a role. I think it definitely does as part of a set of content for a campaign or, or a movement. Kind of it's a hook, isn't it? It'll grab people that might be vaguely interested and maybe then they'll follow that account and see the other stuff. So, I don't think I don't think it could be the core piece of work for an ad campaign, but I think it has a place.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Lillian. Also sit on the fence a bit. I think it can be used, and it's a big but, it's probably tempting to try and use it when it's not appropriate to use it, because that's the thing that goes viral. The cat video is the thing that goes viral, which is clearly what they're trying with Truth there, is they want to get your attention. Everyone loves a cat video, so let's put cats in it, and that will get our message across. But in Truth's case, it may well help, because people will recognize the Truth brand and they'll see other videos from Truth. But in other circumstances, it could just be an advertising agency who is interested in winning an award, or who is interested in getting their brand out, and not so much the message about tobacco. But yeah, I think it probably could be used, but you've got to be careful.
I don't know. I don't know many public health people who are stand-up comedians either. I don't know how funny we are.
As long as we're not writing the material, that's fine.
Exactly. Maybe get some outside help with anything if you want to do a humor campaign. Oh,
Somebody has their hand up.
Yes, someone's got their hand up. I'll just ask to mute you there.
Hi, I have a question regarding the video you just put up. I'm Siriri Shantashay, what youth delegate from RFMSA Thailand. So I was thinking that personally, the video was good for catching attention, but I feel like the link might be too long in terms of catching attention, because usually when you catch attention, the attention span is like on average 7 seconds for youth nowadays. So I have a question I might put out there, that maybe humor could be used, but used in moderation just to grab attention, like maybe a 7 seconds kind of TikTok or a Vine kind of video, and maybe if humor is overused, it could take away from the gravity of the message of tobacco use. So maybe humor can be used, but maybe just limit it to 7 seconds, just to use it to grab attention, and then shift it to something else that might convey the message more seriously for people to understand the gravity of the situation. So I was wondering, do you think that would be a good strategy to use?
I think you make a really fantastic point that we haven't touched on about this length issue, about the degree of willingness for people to pay attention to content. I think that's super important. And I agree with you, getting a public health message out in 7 seconds is incredibly challenging. We are not good at doing it in 4 minutes, being clear about what we want. So it's really disciplined to do it that quickly. And you're right, the average videos that I've been watching, Twitter is my preferred social media platform at the moment, they're usually 12 seconds long, I think, is usually the average that they are. So that's a fantastic point. And yet perhaps humor would be a good way to hook in for that, and then you could try other messages once you've sort of established yourself as someone who puts out good 7-second content. But thank you for that. It's an excellent point. We've got something in the chat here. I'd like to ask about the video you showed before. Kids asked the lighter. Oh, from Bangkok, yeah, the Thai video. They know cigarettes are unhealthy, but it does not stop them. What kind of campaign that is appropriate for this target? It happens in Indonesia as well. Lillian, did you want to address about targeting young people, campaigns for kids, young children?
Yes, I mean, I think the important thing with that campaign is that the target audience was not young kids. I think it was really trying to speak to adults to show them that, if you don't want kids to be smoking, why would you be smoking yourself? So I think if the target audience is trying to tell kids not to smoke, I don't think that ad is effective or appropriate. I think you'd need a different approach.
I'll add that you have to remember that social media is not going to fix tobacco on its own. It's got to be one thing that you're doing as part of a whole suite of actions. Some of them are going to be campaigning, some of them are going to be communication, but there's a whole bunch of other things that you need to be doing. So putting out an ad like that is fine, provided that when people want to quit, they've got somewhere to go. They can get help if they need it, that they don't have all these other life stresses that are weighing them down that make quitting smoking a lower priority for them, because there's so many other things sitting on top of it that's just their one crutch and they're not going to give it up. You've got to understand your audience and the context that they're living in, and whether a message like that is going to actually be helpful or whether it's just going to make them feel bad but not get them to quit.
It can be quite difficult to target youth specifically with prevention messages and quit smoking messages, but we do know from experience that targeting adults with messages that get them to quit and to reduce smoking around children has a flow-on effect. You're more likely to smoke if you come from a smoking home, or if your parents or guardians smoke, or an older sibling smokes. So in some ways, the best way to reduce youth smoking is to reduce adult smoking.
You absolutely don't want to present it as something that adults do, as an anti-smoking for children message or teenager message, because what children and adolescents want to do is be older. So if you tell them it's an adult thing, they're more likely to smoke, not less likely.
Yeah. No one should smoke. We don't want kids to smoke. We don't want teens to smoke. We don't want adults to smoke. We don't want grandparents to smoke. I think we've got one more hand up, and then I think that will be our time. So I'll just ask you to unmute there.
Hello, I'm Suvinay from IFMSA Thailand.
Hi.
So my question is, a lot of video that we have watched today in this session have a kind of direct messaging approach. And I have read some studies that reveal that with this approach, sometimes the people put their guards up and the message got lost. So my question is, what do you think would be the role of subliminal messaging, indirect messaging in anti-tobacco control? And do you think it's effective, and can humor be a part of that? Thank you.
All right. Lily and James, I'll give you a chance to speak first if you like. Or I can...
That's hard. That's a hard question. I don't know if you've got something to say, Becky.
I was going to say, like, this idea of subliminal messaging, number one, it is illegal in a lot of countries. Just kidding. Like, advertisers aren't allowed to advertise subliminally to you. That's not allowed. But I think the idea, like, I think in tobacco control, when we talk about creating social norms, I think might be what you're talking about. So we don't go around necessarily, you know, saying, isn't it so great how we all can't smoke here? We just make it so people can't smoke there. Like, the norm is that when you go to a restaurant or go to a bar, nobody smokes there anymore. Or when you go into a shop, the cigarettes are hidden under the counter because they're not products that we want people to see or encourage them to buy. So we create a new social norm around what's expected and what people take for granted, rather than taking it for granted that you can smoke wherever you like, or you can purchase cigarettes directly off the shelf and see them. We've changed that. So creating the social norm in entertainment media, digital media, that we don't put smoking on screen, that we don't glamorize smoking or allow the tobacco industry to put pay for images in screens or on screens, or images in streaming content, all those kinds of things. That creates a social norm that you don't glamorize tobacco use and e-cigarettes in entertainment media. How you do the reverse of that and glamorize not smoking, I have a hard time wrapping my head around. So I think it's the norm of smoking, removing that as a norm. I hope that answers your question. James, Lillian, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just that the Truth campaign, the first one, so the early stages of that campaign, the message was not telling people to stop smoking or, you know, quit smoking. It was, like Becky was saying, kind of creating this this norm around, like, this young people don't smoke, we're the generation that don't smoke. And then, you know, making it cool to be non-smoker, so having graffiti artists do stuff about not smoking. So it's not subliminal messaging, but it's not a direct you shouldn't smoke message either. It's making it cool to kind of be the generation that doesn't smoke. So I think it depends on the audience that you're trying to reach and the current situation that that you're working in, whether that's an appropriate message or not.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we're a little bit over time and that there's probably a speaker lined up who needs to come on board. So pass
Thank
back
you
to
so
our
much.
chair.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone has any further questions, there's emails available. You can send the emails to ask. Thank you so much, Dr. Freeman, Dr. Kite, and Ms. Chen for this wonderful presentation. And next one, it's all going to be about experience, the past, present, and future trend of tobacco control and media advocacy by Associate Professor Dr. Suryadeo Tripathi.